Awesome. Hey, Lucas, welcome to the It Is Time to Stand Up show.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited about this new show that you've got, and it's always good to be with you.
Absolutely, my friend. So, for those of you who don't know who Lucas is, he is one of the, I'm going to say, like one of the most outspoken voices on a lot of maybe unpopular, but very biblical topics. He's the author of The Christian Left, Woke Jesus. You are a pastor. You are one of the just one of the voices that I absolutely admire
Thank you.
for your stand in culture.
I appreciate that.
And
Really do.
it's so important because a lot of people, they either have truth or they have love. It's a lot of what we've been talking about today, but it's not one or the other. It's both
Yeah.
and they're not afraid to tackle those really difficult topics. But I love that you tackle them with just wisdom and knowledge and history and just all of the things and your pastoral heart as well.
I appreciate that. I think that a lot of us feel the tension in culture. We see the problems that are happening. Of course, I think most people are aware that there's a lot of chaos in the world right now. But what I view my role is helping to give people some more background, to help to give them, more perspective, to help to see things, clearly so that we can effectively be able to dismantle some of the lies that we're seeing presented today. If we just have this attitude of, wokeism bad,
Right.
it doesn't, although that might be true, it doesn't do a lot always to be able to, win any favor by somebody who might be on the fence, or to gain any additional followers from that sense. And so I want to make sure that we're doing a good service to Christ by giving people biblical truth that's sound, that's not given to extremes, but that still is willing to be brave and stand up for these issues that are so important today.
That's right. And we need this now more than ever. That's why this show is going to be called something else. And God was like, no, it is time to stand up.
It's a good name, it really is.
So, one of the things I wanted to kind of address with you today is you wrote with George Barna and several other
Yeah.
authors on a book about the millennial problem.
Yeah, Helping Millennials Thrive is the name of the book. Yeah.
So can we, like, what was your portion of that book? And then what are some, I mean, you're a pastor of a church, so what are some of the issues you're seeing with that millennial generation?
That chapter is actually one of my favorite things I've ever written, and I don't get asked about it a lot, and so I like talking about it. It doesn't have, Barna and Sam Rodriguez are just some amazing guys who are in that. I just feel blessed to be included in the book, really, with those guys. But, my standalone books have gotten a lot more conversation, with me. But this topic that I dove into I called it the unchanging something. And I did kind of a comparison. I like going back in history and finding, maybe more ancient texts or first century documents, or, older, that we can kind of juxtapose to, some sort of modern, situation or truth. And so I did that with some early Greek philosophers. And there was this thing called the constantly changing nothing, is sort of what I compelled it to. And so what we're seeing in this current generation is they're looking for something. They're
Right.
looking for something that's reliable, that's true, but everything that's being presented to them is a constantly changing nothing. Instead of a constant something,
Right.
they have a constantly changing nothing. And so it goes from, it's about race. No, that doesn't matter anymore. Now it's about gender. That doesn't matter anymore. Now it's about body image. That doesn't matter anymore. And, tomorrow it's going to be something else new.
Right.
But none of those things are satisfying. None of those things are providing the answer. They're not providing the solution. There's only one solution, that's Christ. And
Right.
so we have to, make sure that we are helping this generation, really all of us, find that unchanging someone who is Jesus, and because he's the one that has a real solution for them.
That's right. And I love that you use history, because we are destined to repeat
Yeah.
mistakes if we don't know history. And I
100%.
love that you go back and give us the biblical history, because as we can tell with just progressive Christianity and like the borders and margins are always being pushed out. And
Yeah.
to go back to our roots and to say, what was true 2,000 years ago, and how can we apply it today?
100%. When you look at Christianity and say, the ideology of radical progressives. Both have a high value on this thing that we call progress. The left, though, is progressing for progress' sake, whereas as Christians, we are progressing towards a destination. It's a fixed destination. It's not just kind of flying out here in the wind. It's to be conformed to the image of Christ. And so we have a destination in mind, that is Jesus, and we want to go no further. We don't want to stop short. We want to be conformed into his image. That's the progress that we're interested in. But what we're seeing on the other side, I think, is just and really just in the world in general, is progress after something, but because they don't have a destination, because they don't know where they're going, they're constantly moving but never arriving.
Yeah. So how do we reach those millennials as
Yeah.
a parent of, kids of that age? And I just see some of the choices that they make. I see a lot of millennials not in church today.
Yeah.
So what can we do to reach that
I
generation?
mean, you mean besides listening to the Stand Up podcast, it's time
That's
to
right.
stand up here,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
And so, look, I mean, media is a big part of that. We're here at the National Religious Broadcasters, and this is why we do what we do. It's to reach people. And
Right.
I mentioned here earlier in another segment that when you look at the first century, talking about history, the reason the gospel was able to go the way that it was is because the Romans had built roads all over the known world. And roads aren't. I mean, they're important today, but they're not. They're not groundbreaking the way, no pun intended, the way that they were at that time. That was a novel idea. Now what we have is we have a digital road. We have
Right.
this digital pathway of media and TV and podcasting and everything else. Now even the use of AI. And I think as Christians, we have to figure out how to utilize these things in a way that does not change the gospel, that does not water it down.
That's right.
But we use these things as tools to be able to advance the gospel. I also don't, I try to encourage people, especially, my generation and older, that don't discount personal relationship. The younger generation kind of gets pigeonholed with just being this technology driven, and if we can just figure out tech, then we can reach them. I think they're also looking for somebody to stop and say hello, to show interest in them, to build a relationship with them, to mentor them, to say, hey, let's go grab breakfast or lunch and talk a little bit. And I think that just that peer-to-peer or person-to-person, connection is so critical in reaching people where they are. Churches have, I think, struggled with that. There's been a big emphasis on evangelism, but very low commitment to discipleship. And I think that we have to make sure we're balanced in, as we are reaching people, that we're also making disciples with them, and not just getting them converted and then leaving them where they are, or if they don't respond right away, giving up on them.
That is a huge component. And I don't think a lot of churches actually do that part well.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of programs and a lot of things going on in churches, but I also think that this generation is looking for authenticity.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? They are looking, which is why that relationship is so important. And once you have that relationship, then you can reach them.
Yeah, and look, I think the reason why churches struggle with this to some extent is that discipleship is hard. It's messy.
Right.
You have to actually get in somebody's life. Evangelism happens a lot of times in churches from the stage. You give an altar call, people respond, and that's the extent of it. But discipleship is like, hey, let's talk about this thing in your life. Let's talk about this addiction. Let's talk about this relationship. Let's talk about what's going on with
Well,
parents or
help
whatever.
somebody through an addiction.
Yes,
Right?
100%.
Yeah.
And-
When a young mom gets pregnant, then being there to give her resources and options and help and
It
support.
requires a time, and I don't want to discount evangelism. We need both, right? But it requires a time involved that evangelism a lot of times doesn't. And I think that we have to make sure. And what I have found is in churches is that typically Christians seem to be wired towards one or the other, but there's not much empowerment for them. And so evangelism is the pastor tends to take that main role on a Sunday morning, or somebody on the ministry staff in some ways. But I think that discipleship is something we can empower the entire body for. We have a program at our church we're launching called Each One Reach One, and really, where you can kind of commit to say, hey, I'm willing to give, a meeting a month to somebody, and we try to pair them with people that might be a good fit for them, and really, we're seeing great results already, with people that are getting that level of kind of, connection points.
Yeah. So you're a young man, and I just have to know, like, who are the thinkers and the theologians that have impacted you to be so bold in your faith with all you do?
I've had some great mentors in my life and personal relationships, and I could give a list of a lot of names that I've personally been able to walk with. I'm also a ferocious reader, and I started reading, pretty young. And I fell in love with history. I really did. I mean, I can't tell you how many pages of Augustine's, works I've read. One of the books that I got early on it was an abbreviated version and this is probably junior high. It was an abbreviated version of Fox's Book of Martyrs that I think DC Talk, the band, had
Yes,
put
yeah,
out.
yeah,
It
yeah.
had a really cool, like, leatherish cover on it and
I
everything.
remember that.
And I've not kept up with the band or what they're doing or anything like that, but that took me, and after I read that whole thing through probably twice, of these stories of martyrs and people giving their life for the gospel, I remember going to get the full Fox's Book of Martyrs and then reading that. And that was kind of the thing early on in my life that kind of drew me into church history and seeing people that stood up for their faith. And so it's rare. A lot of times I kind of joke that I read an author that's like newer than, 500 years or something like that. But, there are a lot of guys I respect, a lot of peers. Eric Metaxas, I know, a mutual, friend and just an incredible guy. I've enjoyed spending some time with him and seeing all he's doing with his letter to the American church. Just was talking to Dr. Lutzer out here and just, admire his work that he's done in his lifetime. And, this is one of the great things about NRB is you see so many of these, I don't even want to call them all peers because some of these guys I feel like that, I'm still a little fanboying over, here. And so it's just really awesome to see the way in which the intellectual and the spiritual gifts and theology and all these things kind of come together to really give us our unique identities in order to be able to be who God's called us to be.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I always say, read the dead people.
Yes. Chicken Chesterton, C.S. Lewis. I mean, those guys have really changed my life in a lot of ways. And it's my wife and I joke sometimes, some of my best friends are dead, and because of the guys I'm reading. And, but it's, you read some of these books. I read, not a Christian author, but I read Cicero for the first time this year, one of his works. And man, it was one of those things where you just want to tear up at the end. Like I could do a whole podcast just on how important reading is, But I've just been blessed to have some great people speak in my life along the way.
And I'm so glad you said that because as a homeschool mom, that was
Yeah.
one of the things that was really important to me. Because if you read, readers are leaders.
Yes, 100%.
And that is evident with you. So I'm going to give you the last word. I want you to just talk to our viewers here. What's on your heart in this moment in culture?
Yeah, so I think one of the main places that we really need to stand up is in the church. And of course, when you talk about programmatic things, that all matters. But if the heart of the church is off, the programs, it doesn't matter how good the programs are if the message isn't on point. And so one of the things that we've launched is a thing called the American Pastor Project. And so people can go to americanpastorproject.org. And what you're going to find there is you're going to find a statement where pastors, we encourage them to come there and to sign kind of digitally this statement. And we have about 500 plus pastors that have signed this already. So we're reaching, most of the states in the U.S. with different churches. And these pastors are agreeing to preach historic biblical Christianity, and they're agreeing to stand against wokeism in the pulpit and really to eradicate wokeism from the pulpit. And so the other thing is if somebody's watching going, well, I'm not a pastor, that doesn't apply to me. I want you to go to the site for this reason. First of all, I want you to see if your pastor has signed the statement.
Oh, there you go.
And if they haven't, take it to them and take them to the link, americanpastorproject.org. And it's a great litmus test to see if you're at woke church or not. If you're in a place that's teaching the gospel or a place that's going with culture. And the other thing is, if you're looking for a church, we have a map on there, locator, where you can find, and this is churches across all denominations. We tell people, look, set the secondary doctrines aside. This is about primary doctrine.
Right.
And so churches from all different denominations that you can go there, that are committed to sound biblical doctrine, and you could find churches that are listed on there that might be near you that you might want to check out or recommend for a friend or family member.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Lucas, I just want to thank you so much for everything that you do to do for the body of Christ.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for standing for truth.
Absolutely. Thank you.